I made a superhero that was raised by wolves. And it took me 8 years to come up with a better concept. I have no regrets. Hey everyone, I'm V for Verbatim, and today is yet another video that'll distract me from the redraw video I've been meaning to finish. To be fair, the script as of writing this is almost done, but it's still in progress. Today we're moving a little bit away from space hamsters and coming back down to Earth. As you may know if you've watched a couple of my redraw videos, the way I'm doing these videos is one story at a time, based on the order in which I created the stories. I finished Chasing Rainbows and Merlot and Athena. You know, I'm not really set on the names yet, but we're on to Welcome to the Show, and that finishes off the first row of 5 stories. If my very complex calculations are correct, that means I skipped 2. Why did I do that exactly? For the third story in the row called Massacre, it's just not directly connected to any other story, and I've made the decision to let the story go. Though I may release the script and later drawing footage for the story's episode later. And for the first story called Heroes Rising, oh boy, the numbers. This story is the one that's the most fleshed out, since I wrote 2 seasons for it and I started fleshing these characters out all the way back in 2012. It's the first, and based purely on the ungodly number of characters, it's the most convoluted. For the numbers, we start out with a team of 8 heroes in Season 1 that gains 2 members by the end of 26 human experiments that are also important characters. In Season 2, another 2 heroes join the team, partner with a team of 9 heroes, and they fight another 40 villains. In Season 3, 2 more characters join the main team. There's about 11 side characters from space, and the heroes on Earth interact with an organization, being introduced to yet another 23 supporting characters. By Season 4, I lose track of how many characters there are, but since I skipped some characters from the previous seasons that haven't been drawn out yet, or aren't main plot relevant until the end, let's just say there's 22 more characters, give or take possibly a dozen. That's almost 150 characters in a single story, which, based on my character census a few months ago, means that a fifth of all of my characters come together in this one story. And that's without actually writing the last 2 seasons. But anyway, taking on that beast of a story would take nearly 25 videos, and I don't know how I would organize that exactly. So today, this video is going to be a jumping off point with probably the easiest character to explain, and fittingly, the first character I've ever created. She's one of my favorites for her personality, but she's also the one with admittedly the least development over her story. Her backstory has gone all over the place over the years, but one theme remains as a foundation of her character: wolves. So let's get into a video about pride, friendship, drugs, wolves, genies, robot lesbians, and changes that make half of that irrelevant, as we talk about the character that started it all. Azuba Black. Azuba Black, or Night Prowler, was the very first character I ever drew. I made her as an 8-year-old for a Girl Scout event where we learned about comic books, we got to make costumes, and we also made bios for characters and stuff. The perfect kind of event to generate future fanfic writers, honestly. Of the 4 characters I made that day, then Wolf Girl has probably changed the most. Starting out as an alien in a fursuit with a hippo sidekick, she's gradually become more human. Up until 9th grade, she was simply a character that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, losing her memories and gaining powers as the result of a chemical made by Max Astral, the second character I made that day. Physically, she's always remained relatively the same, but I stopped drawing her with lighter skin and brown hair once I made a literal self-insert into the story to channel all of my angst into. Over time, I darkened her skin and hair and played around with her hairstyle, which, I will be honest, didn't exactly fit her ethnicity as a German woman, but that was something I fixed a few years ago, when Agneta Fischer, a German hiding in the woods of Baden-Baden, was changed to Azuba Black, an Arabic girl that was the daughter of a djinn. For this new design and her original design actually, her main inspiration was Batman in terms of the dark colors. However, the story from More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the Wolf Girl, was probably the most significant origin of her design. For personality, I was subconsciously inspired by Undyne from Undertale, especially her forced efforts to make friends with the protagonist during the second half of the story. Undyne, not Azuba. More recently though, Azuba has become a half-djinn character rather than a human raised by wolves. That wasn't actually based on the Miss Marvel thing, since I added that into Azuba's story before the show came out, and for the record, Miss Marvel in the comics doesn't seem to have any actual connections to djinn. The djinn thing was just me looking up wolf creatures in Arabian mythologies, and finding out the djinn can sometimes take the shape of black dogs. The origin of her shift from Wolf Girl to half Jinn was an alternate timeline where I rebooted her character and called her Jinn. After a bit of thinking, I fused both Wolf Girl and Jinn in the main timeline to completely alter her identity, design, and story, to fully make her into Night Prowler. Speaking of her story, actually, her basic arc goes something like this. As the briefest bit of background on the characters mentioned here, all of which are members of the same team that Azuba Black is on, Clara Barton is a character from a previous video about the Death Realm, link in the description. She's a ghost, but that's not important here. She was in a relationship with an android named Tesla, and they're another character that will be important in a hot second. Alexa Agrath is a third character from her team, but she's more notable for the fact that she had an emotionally manipulative father. Before Season 1, Azuba Black, alias Night Prowler, lived in New York City as she had immigrated from her home country without her mother. She didn't realize she was a Jinn until she started noticing a black dog in the background of her pictures in America, a dog she recognized from her childhood that was always just at the corner of her eye. Eventually, she finds the creature and discovers that the dog is her mother in a wolf-like form, protecting her from any danger in the city. Azuba becomes frustrated with her mother's bulldozer parenting style and tries to escape her surveillance, but ends up being witness to an armed robbery. Her powers manifest when she's in a position of insecurity, and she proves she's more than capable in a fight. Her mother leaves her alone, but Azuba, not knowing her mother is gone, runs off and keeps running until her power fades and she falls unconscious all the way in Chicago. Azuba wakes up in a hospital room with no memories of her past, but she's encouraged to join a rising hero team led by Cassidy Joyce. Being a prideful person and an irritable one, she decides to join when the other two people in her hospital room, Alexa and Clara Barton, prod her just the tiniest bit. At the start of the series, she can't use her powers, but she starts to remember bits and pieces of her past over time, and she eventually learns of her mother's death at the hands of Max Astral. He assumed that the dog that stopped the armed robbery from before was her mother, and had her killed because of her connection to Azuba. Over time, Azuba befriends one of their enemies, a human experiment called F, and with the previously mentioned Clara and Alexa, known as Ghost J and Aussie Devil respectively. The two bicker with her occasionally since she seemingly only thinks about herself, but she actively tries to become a better person when confronted, so even if a little hot-headed, she's not too stubborn to try to better herself. Her most significant moments in Season 1 were traveling back to her home country to piece together her past, discovering a villain trying to infiltrate the team and being frustrated when everyone thinks she's being paranoid, and just being a total icon that does not give a shit about all the crazy stuff going on around her. By Season 2, Azuba becomes a supporting character to a larger plot, but as with Season 1, she's meant to be a lovable asshole. It's her gruff nature that causes most people to ignore when she finds someone or something suspicious, specifically the villain of the season, Clen, who pretends to be an ally for the heroes. Despite half of the team eventually turning on Clen, she makes the decision to stick with Clara, who still thinks Clen is a good person, to keep her safe. She eventually joins the rest of the team to help defeat Clen, but she doesn't have much to do in the second season. She is, however, a supportive ally to Clara, Alexa, and the rest of the team. She specifically tries to keep Clara and her partner from being too close to each other, which is actually pretty helpful when the two have to separate from each other emotionally for a little bit after falling out. With Season 3 being admittedly unwritten, my plan for Azuba wasn't ever finished, but I had a vague idea that I can kind of build off of here. For the season, she and half of the team travel to San Francisco to rescue their leader Cassidy, who was kidnapped by an underground network of villains called Phoenix for something that happened in Season 1. I imagine Azuba would be the first to leave with everyone else going after her to stop her. In this season, I would have it so that her powers return, but she struggles to use them effectively. She'd have to get help from another member of the team, Clara's old partner Tesla. The two would reconcile under the notion that they both just want what's best for Clara. Clara's partner would be destroyed in an effort to protect Azuba and give her a chance to keep improving as a hero in the future, and with her partner being gone, Clara being in space at the time without Azuba to comfort her, turns to the only people she has, a team of villains that followed her into space. She turns to villainy at the end of the season and vows to bring her partner back, with Azuba not being there to stop her. Of course, Azuba would spend most of the final season regretting what happened to Clara and Tesla, but she's again reduced to a side role as support for the other characters in their angst. Her last major contribution to the series, however, is her final moments. She goes up against Clara, who's unlocked powers of her own that rival Azuba's. Azuba lets herself loose to bring Clara back to her senses, and she dies doing the thing she had always tried to do. being a selfless friend to the person that had brought so much happiness and fulfillment to her life. The death of Azuba Black is the only set-in-stone death I have for the main team, since most of the characters have other stories that they're involved in after the main series. Azuba dying here makes sense since she really doesn't have much left with her family gone. She's someone that would rush into a conflict without thinking, and it shows the final moment of growth from her initially being against becoming a hero at all, to her actively bringing someone back to the side of the heroes. She's not the most important character, since the series is mostly meant to be an origin story for Cassidy Joyce. She's a secondary character at most. But as a reluctant hero and kind of an asshole, she's definitely a more entertaining character than Cassidy, who is literally just an angst fest while Azuba is over in the corner not taking any of it. Azuba Black is 18 years old at the start of the series, in 2043. The series and her story both end in December 2057, meaning she died at age 33. She's 6'4" and is half Jinn, half human, specifically Arabic in origin. Her father is unknown, but she remembers later on that she had 2 younger brothers. Originally, her brother was drowned by a sea monster and her father and siblings were killed by Max, but obviously that's changed a little bit. Her birthday is February 5th, 2024. She's a cisgender female, and while she has no romantic interests or partners over the series, I toyed with making her and Clara a thing when I made Azuba a male character for 2 seconds. Azuba is most likely straight or somewhere on the asexual spectrum, but she would be an ally. Her mother and family never had names, but I'd assume Azuba and her mother had a turbulent relationship since it was built on dishonesty and overprotectiveness. But Azuba would love her brothers and father wholeheartedly. Clara is Azuba's best friend. She initially finds Clara to be small, feeble, and in need of protection because of how cowardly she started out as. Clara and Azuba are a parallel to how Azuba was initially viewed by her mother. Azuba is protective of her friend, but she loosens the reins over time since Clara becomes a little more strong of will. For a while, she's still a little condescending towards Clara, but she does loosen up. Despite Clara's turn to villainy, Azuba never treats her like a villain, since the time skip between seasons 3 and 4 gave Azuba the time to mature and see Clara as a person rather than a damsel in distress. Alexa is Azuba's second best friend. Their relationship started out a little more toxic. Alexa displayed a lot of tendencies of her abusive father with Azuba, and Azuba only wanted to befriend her because Alexa was nice to everyone except her, and it was an issue of pride. Alexa only considered her a friend to appease Azuba, but would often ignore Azuba and her ideas in favor of people she actually enjoyed the company of. She finds Azuba and her pridefulness impossible to get along with at first. Azuba, meanwhile, bends over backwards for Alexa at every opportunity and tells everyone that she's Alexa's best friend because she assumes trying harder means the relationship is more valuable. It's just more of her doing things for herself. Over time, they distance themselves from their family and toxic tendencies and become better people, which stabilizes their friendship a little bit. Alexa respects Azuba for her efforts to change and acceptance of criticism despite her pride, and Azuba accepts that she's not Alexa's best friend, but their relationship is still meaningful. Tesla is an enemies to friends sort of situation. She was originally a villain before she joined the team. She's the aforementioned partner of Clara and villain that infiltrated the team in Season 1. Azuba was the first to become suspicious of her since she disguised herself as Alexa, and Azuba could recognize that it wasn't her. She held that against her for the first 2 seasons of the story, which is why she didn't approve of her getting together with Clara. Throughout Season 3, the two actually get to know each other and find out that they have a few things in common. Their last interactions before Azuba's death are mostly positive, seeing as Azuba and Tesla end the series as one of the strongest friendships. Olivia, meanwhile, is a member of the team that's about 4 years younger than Azuba. Because of her own immaturity, though, Azuba sees Olivia as a sort of sister figure, sort of friend. She's protective of Olivia when other people threaten her, but unlike Olivia's actual sister, she's kind of a hands-off parent when it comes to Olivia threatening her own safety by being reckless. Her relationship with Olivia is similar to her relationship with other child characters, including her own brothers. F is closer to Azuba's age, but he starts out as a villain under Max Astral. He and Azuba bond over their love of nature and shared attachment issues. F and Azuba both have zero chill when it comes to pursuing their victims and relationships respectively. Their shared but very different intensities and ways of expressing them is a connecting point for them despite the fact that F can't even speak. Azuba is an elemental, a particularly unique one in fact. Djinns draw their power from one of two places, the Chaos Dimension or the Divergency. Azuba only gathers power from the latter, so in basic terms, the Divergency is a place where reality and physical shape bends to the will of those that can tame it. Mortals aren't allowed to enter the realm for their own sake. If they were, their bodies would immediately fall apart, and then they would technically be considered dead. They can no longer die in that taken apart state. The reason some Djinn are known to take on different animal forms, and the reason they can bend reality for wishes, is because they manipulate the power of the Divergency to bend the laws of our world, especially in regards to biological shape. Azuba is half Djinn, but still possesses some of their abilities. First of all, even as her powerless self in the first and second seasons of the series, she sustains injuries like gunshot wounds to the chest that just barely miss vital organs and arteries. Without knowing it, she's slightly more durable than an average human since Djinn are immortal. Her love of wolves and the featuring of a black dog in her hero costume is because of her connection to her main alternate form that she took before losing her memories and powers. And later on, she unlocks her powers in the form of wishes. Her powers are like loose leaf paper in the wind. They can easily become difficult for her to control, but human beings and their spoken commands, or wishes, are a connection to the dimension of the living that can be a sort of paperweight for her powers. To put it simply, Azuba needs people for her powers to work, and she specifically is able to change the form of animals and people around her in natural and unnatural ways. Azuba is the chaotic character for her team that somehow becomes a straight man when everyone else becomes chaotic. Despite being arguably the least heroic member of her team, she actively pushes characters and is an instigator for change across their seasonal arcs. Mostly because she's not really for the whole gentle nudging thing. She's very defensive of herself and her friends, so she goes to 11 very easily, is what I'm saying. She's the main reason Clara becomes a stronger character, and she forces Alexa to confront the cycle of abuse in her family. If Azuba were to be animated, I'd have it so she looks like a dog barking whenever she has her enraged moments, as another nod to her secondary form. And she'd probably be accompanied by dog sound effects whenever someone tells her off. Her fighting style is also a little more animalistic. She bites, growls, and is generally better at close combat. Needless to say, her Djinn ancestry makes her just a little bit like a wolf. And as for actual lines, I figured I'd share some of my favorite Azuba-isms. They're a little cringy since 9th grade me couldn't turn down the cringe, but they hold a place in my heart, so yeah, here you go. From Alexa Simmons to Agneta Fisher to Azuba Black, from alien to human to Djinn, the Night Prowler's character has undergone a plethora of very necessary changes over the years. It's been over 10 years now, and this character has been with me for over half of my life. Like all of my characters, there's a tiny piece of me in her. I think that's why she and several of my more bitter characters are my favorites, despite being simple on paper. They're angry, chaotic assholes, but they desperately want to have purpose and people by their side. They're willing to do anything, be anything to be seen by people, even if they have to be that asshole or an otherwise harsh hand in their loved ones' lives. In the end, Azuba dies a 30-year-old. She's learned and become a more secure version of her childhood self. She didn't need to be remembered, but she didn't want her loved ones to be forgotten for how much they changed her. Which is why the death of Azuba Black, despite bringing an end to the potential she may have had in the future, was the only way I could see her ending. She died as the person her young self always wanted to be, surrounded by the people that cared about her and all that they did for her, mourned and seen. So that's where I'm going to end it. Sorry that the drawing isn't that great. I didn't have a lot of time this week with college and work stuff, so I could have used a little bit more work, but hey, I still got a video out for this week, so that's an accomplishment. But that's gonna do it for today. Thanks for staying for such a long video. It means a lot to my 8-year-old self especially, because look at me, somebody looked at a video about a character that I thought no one would ever see, so just thank you for being here, I guess. And as always, this is V for Verbatim signing off until the next video. Take care and be excellent to each other. Bye!